So I will say this one last time, and then we'll get to this tour to Todd's studio. So my name is David, and I'm the CEO of Edge Studio, and this is Home Studio Show and Tell, where every month we meet. We have two voice actors who donate their time; they volunteer their time to show off their studios. And honestly, it's an amazing event because the people who show off their studios always end up walking away at the end of this session with fabulous information. And everyone who joins and observes also gets terrific information. Todd, in fact, when we got on on Zoom, one of the first things he said to me is how interesting and helpful it's been just seeing previous episodes. So maybe you can talk about that briefly. But I do want to get to your studio. I've known you for a bit. I know you went through our programs. I've heard you read. You're fantastic. I know you're still somewhat new at the industry. Your studio is dynamite. The sound quality, which I've heard. I'm super anxious to see inside your studio. I am also super anxious to see inside Nicole's studio. Nicole and I have only known each other for 6 months, maybe when we first started talking. Nicole, I'm not sure what it's
Yeah,
been.
yeah, that sounds
And
about
okay, well, she is dynamite. She's an amazing voice actor. She's also an amazing casting director, and I'll let her talk a bit about her background. She knows her stuff in and out, and she knows her stuff from both sides of the glass. So it will be a really interesting perspective to hear her talk, and I'm very anxious to see your studio. For those of you who are on this call for your first time, if you have any questions, what you can do is chat your questions. Open up the chat room and text your questions. I will be looking at the chat and taking some of your questions and throwing it toward our guests tonight. If I see that a bunch of people are asking similar questions, I'll try to condense them all into one question. So you'll see my eyes continually going to the side, and that is not me playing solitaire. That is just me looking at the chat. Maybe I'm playing solitaire. No, I'm not. I love these shows. But this is really, it's a terrific opportunity to ask questions, you guys. Like if you have things you're curious about, ask. If you're looking at someone's studio and they have something really interesting that you're unsure what it is, or something you'd like to find out who made that, what manufacturer is it, ask the question. It's a great time. I also mentioned to Nicole and Todd, and I will tell you guys all, that I have told them that they should do the same to you as they are giving a tour of their studio. I think they should say, this is like where I have this or that, and I've been trying to find a company that does X and Y, and does anyone have any ideas? And that's terrific. This is supposed to be a conversation between like-minded people. Everyone has a home studio or is putting one together, and it's a time to help each other. Todd, let's see your studio.
So one of the things I thought I would do very briefly, just to give you an overview, is for a whole nother purpose, I have a video that's about 50 seconds long. So it's just like boom, boom. Let me see if I can just share that with you really quickly, because it does give you an overview, and then we can jump into it a little bit. So, and by the way, David, this has nothing to do with you, but if you look on the left-hand side of this video, what do you see?
Oh, it's a sign.
IKEA furniture.
Quiet, please.
Well, no, the sign.
Quiet, please.
The quiet please sign, just
Wait,
like
hang on.
yours.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that is the same. I think that's the same one I have.
It probably is. It probably is. I've got it wired in, but it's the same. It's the same thing. It's great. I have it on whenever I'm recording, and it stops folks from making undue sound. Okay. Anyway,
Guys, for everyone out there, I think it was in episode possibly 9, maybe episode 8 of this show, that there came a discussion about these signs. And yeah, you can get them on eBay for like $15 or so, and they're fantastic. If you have other people in your home who may barge in, I'm not a voice actor, but when I'm directing, I really need quiet. So I turned it on. So when my kids come home, if I'm working from home, when my kids come home from school, I keep that sign on, and they know not to come in if I'm recording or something. It's really fun. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, here's just a real quick video, 50 seconds or so, about an overview of the studio. So anyway, there it is. I actually made that for another purpose, but I figured it'd be a nice way to kind of give you an overview of what we've got here. So anyway.
Todd, that is terrific.
Oh.
We had in a previous episode, someone had pictures of their studio, which was interesting to look at. But that's the first time. That's a great video you've put together. Very fun. It looks great. I'd like to, if you can walk us inside.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of questions. I do. I want to understand the difference between these two rooms. I saw a few things that I don't know what they are. I'd like to see them up close. And yeah, so give us a tour, please.
I'll give us a tour. And I may not know what they are either. Anyway, let me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my phone. Okay. So I'll come back out to the sort of the engineering station in a minute. Let's go in the booth.
We've lost your visual. You're back.
Oh, okay. So it is a whisper room, and I am fortunate to have a fairly large and quiet space in which I can record anyway.
So let's talk about the whisper room. So
yeah, let's talk about
Todd,
the whisper room.
Yeah. So here's something I want everyone to know. Okay.
Right.
Whisper rooms are terrific rooms. However, from my experience, even though they're called whisper room and you'd think it'd be completely padded and acoustically treated, I have found in my experience that they are not. They're great at soundproofing, but whisper rooms, in my own personal experience, are not good at sound absorption. If you guys don't understand the difference between those two things, you can ask. Again, they're good at soundproofing, but not sound absorption. It is very common for voice actors who have whisper rooms as their recording area to apply extra absorptive material to stop the reflective sound. So you don't have a sound that is echoey. So continue on, Todd.
Yes. Thank you. And Larry just suggested to me that I turn the other direction. Thank you for that, Larry. And David, you're absolutely right. So let's talk about that a little bit. So I have a whisper room. It's called a 4872, which means it's basically 4 feet by 6 feet. But the whisper room, and I actually made a video, kind of a long video that's on my website about this, because the booth is great, but if you do not add the appropriate materials inside the booth to manage both reflection and absorption, you'll end up with just a giant echo chamber that won't let any noise in from the outside, but you'll have all the noise you need on the inside. So before I ever built it, I did some other things. So let's just talk briefly about that. So here we are, right? So you walk in, it's kind of long and narrow. And on the walls, I have ATS acoustical panels. They're 4 inches deep, and they are mounted just slightly off the wall. So they have a little bit of space behind them as well to act as a little additional sort of vacuum is too theatrical a word, but just a little bit of additional airspace. So I have these long ATS brand of acoustical panels here and here. And then if you walk in the booth, see, obviously there's your mic. As you walk in the booth, I've done a couple of iterations of this. So if any of you have seen it previously, it's changed a number of times. I'm always looking for improved sound and improved comfort and all that. So I built this table. This table is built out of a reclaimed redwood. So I cut up and built that table, put my keyboard, my mouse on there. My headphones are hanging over on the side. And then I have a small iPad that I use for some things. And then I have this big screen that I can use for editing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then I can also use it for reading long form scripts. And I have a camera on top of this one too, if I was going to do a directed session. But back to David's point, in the corners here, there are long, narrow acoustical panels that are 6 inches deep and have space behind them. And they are my giant bass traps. And I recognize that, the word bass trap is maybe a little bit of a misnomer. It's not like they're just catching bass frequencies, but I did the best I could, not being a physics major or being an audio engineer, to create space in the corners that would absorb sound. And then there's another 4-inch acoustical panel behind the monitor there. There's some additional like other kinds of foam. These are the big Leonard base traps here. I've done the whole ceiling. There's another ATS trap there. There's another ATS trap on the door. Bottom line, I guess, the experts would say that, you need to cover 60, 70, 80% of your booth to avoid reflections and absorb sound. My booth is really about 100% covered. The ceiling is all covered, and even the floor, I've got a couple of thick rugs on the floor as well. So there's a great deal of, and then the microphone, I'm actually talking into the microphone at an angle, and I did this on purpose because in a previous setup here, I was talking directly toward the screen, and the screen was completely vertical. And I found two things. Thing number one is that my voice was projecting out right into the monitor and then bouncing right back into the beautiful, high sensitivity diaphragm of this Neumann TLM 103. The other thing I found is that if I tilted the monitor down, as I've done, I'm not only not talking right into the monitor, but it's my hope, without being able to see the sound, that the sound waves are reflecting down at an angle. And bottom line is, I do have an engineer that helps me with all of this, who helped me not with the design of the booth, but helps me with sound. And his attestation is that it's pretty good, and the sound is pretty dry and not reflective.
I'd like to throw in a couple of comments for people who may be new to voiceover. First of all, I'm shocked in a good way to see Todd's setup. I mean, this is beautiful, Todd. Fascinating and super cool. Most people will never need 4 inches of foam. That is a lot. Like, Todd, you have done this to like the nth degree. I'm very impressed. If you were starting off and on a tighter budget, unless your voice is very deep or unless you are a very loud speaker, possibly 1 inch and most certainly 2 inches of foam will be enough to stop bouncing around in your booth. On top of that, and even for bass traps, even going to 4 inches perhaps. There was something else with the coverage of a room. Yeah, a lot of people do, Todd, a lot of people say some magic number, 60% coverage, 80% coverage, 90% coverage. I believe it is more to do with opposing surfaces. That tends to be even more important. So, guys, what happens is if you have 2 hard surfaces, which are completely opposite of one another, the sound can travel back and forth, ping-ponging back and forth. It's called flutter echo. And that's when you get echo that is so fast, the repeats of echo are so fast that you can't distinguish between the sound. Like you can't distinguish between the bing, 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 bing. And that's when we call, that's when the word reverberation comes into play. Reverberation is just extraordinarily fast echo. That's the biggest issue. So Todd, it's brilliant to angle the monitor, to talk at an angle. You're breaking up the sound wave. Some of your foam also has the angles, which help diffuse, break up the sound wave. So fascinating. Awesome. Loved it. I want to visit your studio and go running in there and play in there. Like, it looks great. Let's see your other room now.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. As I think I've commented to you before, David, my objective here in all of this was to make my studio so good that every time I don't get a job, it's either because I'm not the right fit or they don't like my voice or I didn't do a good job. I don't want anybody to ever say to me, the sound just isn't good. If they don't like Stark, they don't like Stark, and that's out of my control. But this part I wanted to have in my control. Anyway, let me say, so anyway, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Todd, I'm going to interrupt. Someone asked a very interesting question, and I think you should talk about this briefly, if you don't mind, before we go on. Someone wrote,
sure.
And I'm reading this I've not gone through the whole question yet, but they wrote, I have an idea to replace the screen, use an LED projector, which is very small, have that, I think that meant to say set up, have that set up behind your, I'm having a hard time reading it. Hang on. Sorry. Have that behind you projecting on a piece of cloth in front of you. Interesting. Okay. So have a projector projecting onto a piece of cloth in front of you. No more plastic reflector behind the mic. Interesting.
That is interesting, and I can see how that would work. If my setup didn't work, if my setup hadn't tamed the any standing waves or any reflections or any absorption, that's something I would definitely consider. I can see how that would work. And admittedly, this is like the third iteration of my booth. If you notice, I have this little stool here which I sit on. I've just recently gone to sitting for almost all my work. I used to stand almost exclusively. Now I sit very correctly. I sit very erect. I try to sit naturally. I find, at least for me, I can provide a more relaxed read in most instances that way, but I had to learn that the hard way. And in fact, I used to use this stool right here, which is a great, like a bar stool, but it also has a seat that makes just ever so slight amounts of noise. And I can't be in a super quiet booth with a Neumann mic and not hear it. So I had to take off my shoes and get this stupid wood stool, but it works. Everything works well. I like that idea though. That's a clever idea. I would never have thought of that.
Yeah, that was from, let's give him a shout out, Michael Doven Gray. Smart idea, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Okay, so then out here, this area, and this was traditionally just an office for me. When I stopped working in the corporate world and started doing some consulting on my own, I was down here, but I ripped all of that apart to create all of this. And because I do, and I'll shortly get back on the mic over here, because I was working over here, I needed to manage some sound reflection as well. So this is now all foamed off over there. I've put drop down ceilings, again, with heavy paneling all the way around to keep control of the waves. And that's worked pretty well. And, in my previous travels, I've had lots of rugs. And what do you do with all these silly rugs? Well, you put them on the floor to manage sound. And this is an area that I use for some stuff. It's just kind of my teleprompter setup area that I built, and on a big stand, and do some stuff over there. This is the area, and I have another area over here. This is the area that I use for my editing, sound editing. I do use cans. I do use headphones. I have both Sennheiser and a Beyerdynamic headphones, and I like them both. At least for me, they're both comfortable and they provide accurate sound. I also use monitors. In fact, I'm using monitors even more today than I was before. They're KRK Rocket 7s, and they provide a beautiful flat sound, which helps me, particularly since my hearing isn't as good as it used to be, and I've got tinnitus pretty badly, and so I can cut through pretty well on that. When I'm doing stuff online, like we were doing now, I've got these big Elgato key lights, and I'm an Apollo Twin user. I do have other portable interfaces that I use from time to time that will be familiar to many of you. I can record obviously on my MacBook Pro. I have a Mac Studio over here, and that's been great. The Mac Studio has been wonderful for doing most of the work. It's fast, and I like to do video work as well as audio work, so that works nicely. And then I dump it all off immediately to just a little separate drive. As you know, I've got a TLM 103 in the booth, and I've got an MKH 416 out here that I use for, discussions like this. I occasionally use it in the booth sometimes too, if I'm going to be doing something sort of loud. I've got a Shure SM7B as well, which is good for podcasting and all that kind of stuff. Back everything up on a pretty good sized power adapter. And it's very comfortable to sit here. I feel really good about the setup. As I say, it's kind of always in flux, you know. It's kind of nothing ever stays static. I figure something out and then I change it. But the setup that I have right now seems to work pretty well, and I'm pretty satisfied with it.
I'd like to ask one question from
Sure.
someone here. It's a very good question too. Ventilation in your booth.
Right.
Mm.
So what I do for ventilation in my booth, I'm going to turn my camera back around here for a second. And we're going to go back in here for 1 minute. So everybody follow the flag. We're walking, walking, walking. Here is the controls. This is the control for the lights above my head. And then this is the control for the ventilation. It's a built-in ventilation fan system, which is blowing air through the backs. You can't really see behind there, but there are ventilation openings there. Then it comes through here, and behind my booth, you know, you can see all the stuff going through there. And I've got a series of ducts which baffle the air. And then it comes down through a tube, and that tube comes down here. And I have a fan inside this cabinet here. Not cabinet, it's just a shelf of some kind. And I have a few things on here from different phases of my life or whatever. I have other tools and things over here. But in that box right there is a very strong and quiet fan, which I can turn on and off remotely from inside the booth. And then this acts as the insulating cabinet. I've insulated the inside of that cabinet, and then it blows air out over there, and the air then gets diffused around all of that stuff. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I will say this for people who are new to the industry. Ventilation is always a very big concern with booths, because when you close yourself into a small room, if you are reading a long form narration or an audiobook, that room gets really hot, like super hot. You'd be surprised how hot those rooms get. And, you know, it sounds easy to bring a fan in or something or have an air conditioner, but that's loud. And when you're in a booth like Todd's or any quiet room, the microphones will pick up that fan noise, and, you know, that's not a good thing. So the whisper rooms do come with some stock ventilation systems. You can purchase them. And what happens, and you can purchase these even standalone ventilation systems. In essence, to have ventilation, what happens is you take the tube that carries the air, the movement of the air from the fan to the actual vent where it's blown into the booth, and the tube that carries the air, isn't that called a tube? What's it called, Todd? The flexible.
Yeah, the flexible duct work or whatever.
The duct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time the duct makes a 90-degree turn, it cuts the decibels in half. I think that is the equation. If someone knows for sure, they can put that into the chat. So these ventilation systems, the ducts are like intestines that like just kind of all mumble jumbled like a big pile of spaghetti or something. And it does make it harder for the air to get through, because now you need a larger, stronger, more powerful fan to be able to blow the air all the way through this like loop duct. So you need a bigger fan, which is even louder. But eventually, if you find the right balance and you get a strong enough fan with the right number of loops, and you can get a system that's ventilation that is essentially quiet.
Yeah, that's a good point. I generally do not turn my fan all the way up if I'm recording. Because it's powerful. If I turn the fan all the way up, I run the risk that my sound flora will be compromised. I can turn the fan up to about 60%, and I don't hear it at all, even with dead quiet. And that's plenty, because that provides enough air circulation for the work I do. But if I'm in there and I'm doing long form, like I recently did an audiobook, and when I'm taking a break, I'll crank the fan just to provide greater circulation until I go back in. But it does a pretty good job. But you're right, you have to run that thing like a gastroenterologist. You have to run that tubing so that you really reduce the decibels significantly.
Todd, this is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I think I'm looking at the comments here. Someone said, "Did you say you were brand new to this business?" Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really I'm liking some of these comments. Guys, thank you so much. I want to switch over to Nicole in a minute. Let's take one last really interesting question for Todd. Is there any, I don't know, let's see. Why is the engine, he jumped into the deep end of the pool? Yeah. Here's a question. Why is the engineering space acoustically treated? Is it for recording or for when the monitors are being used? Two acoustically spaces are needed for VO? Yes, I can quickly answer that.
Please.
Most voice actors who have one room and they work in one room. That room is usually acoustically treated so they can record in that room, they can edit in that room. It's nice to have a separate room if you have the space, right? You know, if you have a house and your kids have moved out or something like that, and you have the room, that's terrific. And what Todd has done here, we can all see, is he has one big area that he's purchased a whisper room and he's put it in that room, right? The whisper room is a room in his other room. Um, Engineering rooms, or sometimes we call it control rooms, should sort of, to the best of our ability, they should sort of mimic the typical listening environment of a typical listener. You want to basically be able to judge how other people will hear your recordings. So it's great to be in a room that has some acoustical treatment, not too much, not like his booth, but just enough so the room is not like an echo chamber, yet is not totally dry like his recording booth. Still, I will forewarn anyone, when you are editing, you should be on headphones because you'll hear a lot more on headphones. And when you're testing your sound, you should be on headphones. But if you're doing a lot of just cutting out of words you don't like the way you said them or things like that, and you want to work on speakers, yeah, it's nice to be in a room that has some acoustical treatment.
Yeah. In fact, to that point, when I do a first cut, right, I have a track, and first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to cut out space, or I'm going to put in a few simple fades, or I'm going to take out goofy stuff, or I'm going to move tracks around or whatever. I'll do that on the monitors, and that works beautifully. Then if I export that track and then I bring it in to do some modifications to that track or get closer to where I'm going to master the track, then I'll put the cans on so that I can really hear what's going on. And I like having both of those effects because, to your point, somebody may be listening to this in a very critical environment. Other people may be listening to this on their iPhone or in a car or someplace. And so I need the track to sound good under all possible environments. And, I don't take it for granted, believe me, that I have been able to create a space that I think works really well for me. I'm grateful and I'm fortunate that I could do that.
Thank you so much. Remember, Todd has volunteered his time to be here, as has Nicole. Nicole, hello.
Hello.
Hey, there you are.
Hey.
It's great to see you. We've had recently some long conversations by phone, by Zoom, but I'm so excited to see your studio. I'm looking at the background. Such a cool picture of like the city of New York City,
Yeah,
perhaps.
This is the here, I'll turn my phone around. That's the typical IKEA poster, right?
Oh, cool.
A flat iron. I love it. So, man, my studio is not like Todd's. I'll just say that right now. I am a do-it-yourself, build my own studio. So
Wait. Before you start, though, can you tell us all just briefly about you? I mean, you're so amazing what you do in this industry.
okay, well, I started as a commercial producer. So I started recording and producing a lot of radio, and then went into television commercials. And it was way back when it was radio, TV, film. So way before the internet, way before digital. I literally started cutting commercials on 35 millimeter. I go back that far. So I approached voiceover. For me was agency reels, listening through hundreds of talent demos, trying to organize and get that talent in my own talent base, and then going through casting and recording, whether it was television, voiceover, radio. Then later, I actually moved to New York most of the 90s, for the decade of the 90s. I still worked as a producer, but at that time I started training as a performer. And it was just a natural progression to want to do voiceover because I had so much experience on the other side of the glass and saw how fun it was. And I knew a lot of actors, and having written copy and directed actors and casting, it just made sense. So then I came back to San Diego, and now I'm very much into audio dramas. I perform in them. I produce slash I direct them. There's 2 audio dramas that I direct. We're about to launch a 3rd show. I do all the casting for the company that I work for, and I love it. It's kind of a niche little area for voice, because most voiceover actors are going to do commercial or digital marketing now, and which is great. The pie is huge. There's easy entry, like I'm about to show you my build it yourself little studio area. And what's exciting is there is enough work out there to find, and it's almost all 100% remote now. It used to be in person in studio. It was a whole different pipeline and functioning for the industry, but now it's at home and anyone could do it and step in. And I spend a lot of time now in the voice industry, but still do on camera and produce as well.
Fabulous. Okay, let's see your place.
Okay, now it's hot. I'm in San Diego, so it's hot here. So my fan's already running. You were all talking about keeping it cool. I get very hot. If you see in the corner of my room right there, that's my booth. This is my work office space, my desk, and I do all my production out here usually, my editing. But when I record, I'm in this little booth, and you see there's a window, which is not great. If you can create your home booth in the interior of your house or away from a window, that's ideal. But I could not. So what I have here is these window shields that I made, super inexpensive, just some blanket on one side. It's just foam core, super lightweight, but those bend really easy. And I place those in the window and they work great. I'm not doing it right now because it's hot and I want to keep the window open. So if you have a window, actually, I saw on an earlier home studio tour, someone had made shields. So they gave me the idea. So there's a benefit right there. So the next thing I kind of want to mention is I often, if someone's asking me about their home studio, I mention these wall dividers. This is just a 3-panel wood room divider. And I attached it to the wall so it won't tip over. It's now secured. These work great for creating a space that's not square. And then I have 2 little panels here. These are about 1.5 feet wide that I put together. They create like a separate little wall. The skateboard deck is my son's art, so I try to make it look nice. That's what that is. And this, when I'm actually tracking, I clip that up and that's the door. So I am completely sound dampened in there, but we're going to go inside now. So you'll notice right away the flag. This is a World War II flag that was from my stepfather eons ago, and he passed and we found it. And I love it because it has the 48 stars and I love the color. And this was another tip that I picked up at an earlier home tour that Edge supported, because if you remember, I think, David, it was, I want to say Dan Leonard. He had like fabric with the mustache on it. And you then said, hey, everybody, think about your studio. It doesn't have to be dark and dreary. You could put fabric up. And I love my flag. So I designed my booth to have my flag in the background, which I think is pretty cool.
That is fabulous.
So it's not square. It actually is an interesting shape. This is like a little cubby area where I have usually my workstation is on a plant stand. My interface is underneath. I usually have a fan down there. I have a gobo to kind of keep the sound contained. I like that it's away from my mic because the computer has a fan. and I don't like picking up the fan noise. If I turn in this direction, I always have my copy on an iPad. I like it to be digital and up high, but sometimes in doing spot work, I'll just print out a hard copy, which I'm put here, just put it right there. It's ready to go. But in most cases, I use the iPad. But when I'm doing dramas, a lot of times there'll be a lot of changes. There's always changes. So I always make sure I have a hard copy. So the audio dramas I work on are like 2 feature film length scripts. Hard to do with one hand. Here we go. So I have a hard copy, so I'll make notes if there's a lot of script changes, but I don't read off that. I'm actually reading off my digital iPad. I have a second screen here. So if I'm doing commercial copy, I could use the second screen to look at my tracking and make sure my levels are good. With audio drama, I'll actually run our live remote schedule that shows where we are all the time. So it helps me stay on schedule. This is my mic. I have a Deity S2, which is a short shotgun. It's probably, I think, the best value for the money. It's a pro level mic for audio drama. You have to have a lot of dynamic range. Podcast mics usually break up with the frequency when we're screaming and yelling and doing action scenes. So I love this little mic. And because I have these panels that are pretty sturdy, I can reconfigure this whole booth. When I do audio dramas, sometimes I'll have my arm attached up here. And so I'm speaking right into this angled area of my booth for better sound dampening. But that's kind of it. I like it that it's big enough for me to move around. I think physicality is really important when you're performing, and still functional. I can come in anytime and just kind of hook it all together and it's ready to rock and roll.
Nicole, of a lot of studios I've seen over the years, and through this show and just voice actors who I know, one of the smartest things ever are some of the things you've done. The wall divider is such a terrific idea, because you're right. And I hope you all take note of this, everyone. They are typically 3 wall dividers, right? They're like accordions. Like I don't know, putting them in in a room in a shape that's not square is just brilliant. I think it was clear from a previous conversation in this episode why it should be clear why you don't want to have a perfectly square room, because you get that flutter echo, right? So having one angled wall is really brilliant. This is, I don't know, Todd, you said it right before we began. Todd said to Nicole and I 2 minutes before we turned on the episode for everyone. Todd said, I love these shows because it's just so interesting to see how different people go about their studio. Todd, you should say it. What you said was, I thought, brilliant.
Well, I don't know exactly for sure what I said, David, but the intimation is this. There are as many designs for a studio as there are personalities of people. And just like there are different personalities of people and they all work and we can all live together, we hope, the same is true of the studio. You can do, and I see that every time I see it, it blows my mind. Everybody does things a little bit differently or radically differently, but they come up with the same end in mind, because we're all shooting for the same thing here, right? As it relates to the sound, right? We all want a flat, dead, clean sound so that we can focus on things like script interpretation and how we act and how we enunciate and pacing and tempo and all of those things without having to worry about good sound. And it blows my mind the number of different ways to do that, all of which are equally great. And this show, I've never seen another show like this that shows that off so beautifully.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd. That's well said. And yeah, Nicole, you're getting comments here, and I don't know if you're looking at the chat while you're on camera here, but people were saying people wrote a wonderful job putting it together. Looks great. creative. Someone else wrote creative. Interesting question. Someone wrote, I can answer this or you can, Nicole. Why do you cover the windows? Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, it's sound. It's cars, motorcycles, dogs, lawnmowers.
Mhm.
I have double pane glass, but they are not super soundproofed. So you want to dampen as much sound as possible from a window. Otherwise, you'll need to stop mid-track and wait, and then have to redo it. It's just the window's great for air because it does get hot in here, but ideally you don't want to be near a window.
Yeah. So, and a few things about that. So I think, Nicole, you're talking about two things here. You're talking about soundproofing, right? To getting rid of unwanted sound like birds and everything in trucks. You're also talking about dampening the sound, meaning stopping the reflection. So covering the windows really does two things. You're soundproofing and working on the absorptive quality of your studio, deadening the studio, which is super helpful, as we've talked about. For you guys, one of the things we said earlier when looking at Todd's interior of his studio with his 4-inch and 4-inch walls and 6-inch bass traps, they said, you don't have to go to that depth. When you're trying to stop a truck driving by outside and you're trying to stop that sound from coming in your studio, 4 inches or 6 inches may be necessary. Like, it's really hard to stop the very bassy sound. The wave frequencies are so large. They just go through almost everything. Which, by the way, I want everyone to take note of something Todd said, which is also brilliant. A lot of you both rock. My goodness, you guys are great. A great thing that Todd spoke about was having an air gap behind his sound pads. That air gap can make your acoustic treatment twice as effective. Seriously, you pay whatever money for an acoustical piece of foam or something, and you instead of putting it right to the wall, you have like an inch of air, and that is significantly more effective. If you hang blankets from your ceiling, everyone, rather than take a thick blanket and just and hammer it into 4 corners of your ceiling and make it tight against the ceiling, let it droop down. Even letting it droop down by 1 inch is fabulous. And if you have 2 blankets on your ceiling, then have the first one droop down 1 inch, and the second blanket also held up by 4 nails, 1 in each corner, let that droop down an additional inch. So then you have the ceiling, an inch gap of air, a blanket, an inch gap of air, and another blanket. The little air pockets are super helpful. We have about 3 minutes left. There's a bunch of long texts here. Let's see. Here's one. Back when I was interviewing people for Vopedia, Randy K was a wonderful, wonderful voice actor. Said it was okay to talk longer because she couldn't record. I'm not sure if there's a question there. It gave him confidence to. Yeah, let me look for. That's Randy. Hey, Randy. I want to look for a question here real fast. If anyone has a really interesting question, you can unmute your mic, please, and speak up, because we only do have about 3 minutes left. And I'll need at least a minute of that to tell you guys how to save the chat from this event and everything like that. Someone wrote, "Great job, Nicole. Your space has so much personality and it didn't cost big bucks. Love your son's skateboard art. Impressive."
Yay!
Hey, you got your son some kudos there too. That's awesome. Yeah. There's
Thank you. I
yeah.
appreciate it.
So Nicole also volunteered her time, everyone. So kudos to her. Home studio show and tell. We're thrilled with it. All of the past episodes are on the website. Pardon me. And if you've missed any, you should go back and binge watch. Like, there are some really good ones along the way. And as Todd said, yeah, you'll see everyone just does it differently. And if you are building your own studio, the amount of ideas you can gain is helpful. But also, as Todd said so eloquently, just understanding that you can go in different ways is helpful. And then looking at things that Nicole does by just taking a piece of foam and putting some, looks like black electrical tape around the outside as a border. I mean, it's brilliant. It's it's light. It's easy to use. I mean, these things work fantastically. So studios do not need to be super fancy. They don't need to be super expensive. I know plenty of voice actors who spend virtually no money on their studio, on the physical studio. They do use all of their old sweaters that they no longer wear, kids' old sleeping bags, moving blankets. The studio may look really weird, but it sounds great. But you do need to be considerate, because sometimes live directed sessions, you are on screen these days. Doesn't happen much. But if you are on screen, the word of advice is to have it look professional. It doesn't have to look super expensive, but have it look professional. So you don't have like underwear hanging in your background if you're working in the laundry room. Like I've seen all stuff over the years. Anyway, listen, guys, we record these. This episode will be on our website. If you want the chat, and there is some interesting information in the chat. If you want the chat, you need to download the chat, because the chat does not make its way to our home studio show and tell page. To download the chat onto your own computer, at the very bottom of the chat, look for 3 little horizontal dots. And if you click that, it says save chat. And if you hit save chat, it should save your chat somewhere. Oh, in our last minute, my goodness. Right, the 12 new messages. Let me see if I can ask a question really fast. Oh, you know what these are? It's guys, Nicole and Todd. It's everyone just saying thank you. Loved it. Awesome job. If any of
Yay.
you want, we absolutely. Todd and Nicole, thank you. If anyone wants to showcase their studio on an upcoming episode, let us know. We have a number of people who have expressed interest, and so I think we have quite a number of shows filled going forward. I think if I understand correctly, either Nicole or Todd were like a last minute, because one person had to cancel for tonight. Was that you, Nicole?
I think so. Yeah. It
Oh,
was like,
okay. Thank you so much. Thrilled that you got in. It's awesome. Everyone, this is Home Studio Show and Tell. I am David. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I hope to see you next month. Same time, first Tuesday of every month, 9 p.m. Eastern time. I wish you all a fabulous month. Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.
Todd and
Thank
Nicole,
you,
thank you
David.
again.
thanks.
Pleasure.